as we do once a week, every week. Drew, what's on your mind this week, my friend?
Well, Mr. BJ, I've been doing a lot of podcast watching lately, so it helps with the ideas and the creation of our show and what you see within thumbnails, extra content, and new shows, even things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But today, what's on Drew's mind is NBA player podcasts,
Mm,
and I think we're gonna rank some here today.
okay.
We're just gonna and I might miss some because there are lists out there, but some that aren't as updated as you'd like them to be. So, mid-season stories about these player podcasts, and there have been more created ever since that point. And I've found some of them. I don't think I've
Mm-hmm.
found them all, but we'll talk about some of the ones that I have seen, have not seen, and have interest in seeing.
Okay. Cool.
So let's start with that before we rank anything, and let's go through some of these podcasts that I have seen. Whether this is at least one episode, not like just I'm in tune with the whole season, but I've seen an episode of it at least. Uh, Kevin Durant's podcast. Kevin Durant has a podcast. It's called the ETCs with Kevin Durant on Apple. Uh,
Okay.
that hosts it with a guy named Eddie Gonzalez. They talk about everything from NBA to pop culture. Each episode touches on several interesting topics over roughly an hour. Um, I got to check out one episode of that, and I think it was. I don't even think I got through the entire episode. It was just a really long clip on Twitter, but I ended up watching it. And Kevin Durant is, I don't even know what type of personality you'd use to describe him, but he's not one of the guys I'd really see as a podcaster, and
Yeah,
he's not.
I didn't think he was kind of, the vibe of him as a player, and I mean, I've been wrong about, players and their, how they come off their personality wise that you'd see in a pod, but I never really got that feeling with KD that he would be, a vibrant personality on a podcast.
Well, hey, I mean, and you're right. I mean, for the most part, KD's still KD, but I mean, when he gets like in deep talking about basketball, I think, and he's really liking the conversation, I think he can be pretty good. But I guess for the most part, you probably he wouldn't make. He's not going to make a top five list that I'm going to make
Yeah,
here in a bit. Someone that will though, who has a very popular show, and I believe he's on the Volume Sports now,
yeah, I
and
know who
that's
you're talking about.
Draymond Green.
I like his
The
show.
Draymond Green show. Yep.
I have
We've
watched his
seen
show.
yeah, I've seen it as well, and we've seen Draymond on NBA on TNT as well, and there's been many opinion out there that he's going to be really good at this. He's really good at it now, and
Yeah.
he should be on one of the NBA on TNT crews. Once he's done playing and do something like that.
I agree. I think if you look at just based on, kind of what you've got out there in terms of these player pods, his is always, if not at the top, near the top. I think he's one of the smartest basketball players that we've got in the game. Maybe he gets a little, there's a little bit of the extracurriculars that go on that he could cut down on.
Hmm.
But I mean, I think he's such a smart IQ basketball player, and it comes out in his podcast when he talks about the league and how coaches and systems are used. It's really just fascinating.
Yeah, he's got a wealth of knowledge, that's for sure.
Hmm.
This next player, I haven't listened to his podcast. Didn't know he had a podcast until I found this list. But Danny Green, Danny
Yeah,
Green has a podcast. It's called Inside the Green Room with Danny Green. I like that
that
name.
makes sense. I didn't know that was a thing either. Honestly.
Yeah, he's got a Twitter and everything apparently at Green Room Inside. Um, it's about his life experiences in basketball, is what he shares on the show, revealing insights he's learned through his career, with his episodes coming out fairly frequently. He usually covers current events in basketball as well. One that I have heard coming up on this list, heard of it before, don't believe I've watched his podcast, but a really long clip of him talking about wine and some other things. Uh, CJ McCollum got a podcast. It is the Pull Up with CJ McCollum, and let's see. He covers several topics related to the NBA. He's on hiatus while he works for ESPN. He could always
Hmm.
return to his old podcast or only do the show he is working with on ESPN. But Pull Up with CJ, been doing that for a while now, and one of the many podcasters in the NBA. Uh,
Is this list active players, or can it include some that were active but are not now?
you'll see.
Okay,
Next up, a player that was just in the NBA Finals apparently has a podcast, and it's Duncan Robinson.
really
Duncan Robinson's got a podcast that he co-hosts called The Long Shot. It releases every Wednesday or at least weekly. He speaks with co-hosts and guests weekly with exciting insights on each episode about sports. Okay.
interesting.
Next is one that you probably have heard of with these two players, and it's funny that you just asked that question, BJ, about whether it's retired or active players. Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles podcast,
Gotcha. That's
Knucklehead
not the one.
podcast.
That's not the one I was thinking of, but
Oh, okay.
that is interesting.
They're still going strong today. They started years ago. We've seen all
Yeah,
types of people come through their podcast for the clips that have come through on social media and things like that. And the famous question that always sticks in my mind from one of their episodes is when they ask NBA players to come on, they talk about when they came in the league, who was the first player to bust their bleep. So that one always sticks in my mind. It's a good clip of answers as well if you get to check
yeah,
that out. Next one is Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson with the All the Smoke podcast.
interesting. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one, but not. You're adding to the list of things that I need to at some point check out.
Here's one you probably have checked out. It's fairly popular, and he was active during the NBA Finals. Can you guess, BJ?
Is it Jamal Murray's podcast?
Eh.
No.
Nope, and actually, I don't have Jamal Murray on this list, but nice to know that Jamal Murray has a podcast.
I was just saying that maybe I don't know if he
Oh,
does.
okay,
I
okay.
was asking.
Never mind. You had a piece of this right. His name does start with a J. It's J.J. Reddick.
Uh huh.
The Old
Yeah.
Man and the Three
That's
podcast.
that's the one I was thinking of when I asked.
Yeah, Old Man and the Three, solid podcast for sure.
But he
He's
wouldn't he
he's
wasn't active. He was just because he's retired now. He's been a
correct.
yeah. I thought you meant active player, not active podcaster. Okay.
Well, I mean, it is active players. Wait, what do you? I don't. When I did I say active?
Yeah, you said JJ Redick was an active player, or when you were talking like you led up to he was active during the NBA Finals.
Oh, no, I that's not what I meant with
All
that.
right. Well,
I
that's why I
I figured
asked.
you would know that because you know he's not playing.
Well,
I
no,
mean
that's
he's active podcasting
okay.
during the NBA Finals. See, you confused me.
You
Oh,
confused me. We're let's
mine
move
was
on.
straightforward. Next up, Gilbert Arenas,
Yeah, I
No
we
Chill podcast.
I think we've had a clip of his podcast that we talked about
Maybe.
before. He had a guest on, and I think it was talking about like undervaluing Dirk. Maybe it feels like that was something that we
Maybe.
talked about.
Next up, Shaq. Shaq apparently has a podcast. The Big Podcast is what it's called. And I swear I've seen him on another podcast that I can't remember the name of, but that is one that he does. Also, another podcaster out there, Road Tripping with Richard Jefferson
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one. I think Chuck has a
and Channing
podcast
Frye.
too.
Who?
Chuck has a podcast too, right?
Oh,
Chuck
yeah,
Barkley
he does one with
with Ernie.
Ernie.
Yeah,
I don't remember
inside the
what it
bubble
was.
room or steam room or something.
Yeah, Steam Room. Steam
That's
Room.
right.
Yeah,
That's right.
Steam Room. Good call there. See, this is why you can't rely on these little bitty lists here. I haven't seen that one though. I've just seen the little clips
I've
that
seen
pop up
clips. Yeah, that
from it
they've.
as well, but I bet it's interesting.
It
From the
can be funny.
podcast that I've seen, BJ, in a no order top five,
Okay,
you got to throw in the Draymond Green show,
for sure.
The Old Man in 3 with JJ
Correct.
Redick.
Yeah,
Um, does All the Smoke make it? No, let's go with the. I'm gonna go No Chill Pod with Gilbert Arenas,
that's what I was thinking too.
and let me also toss in the Knuckleheads podcast. Those
Hmm.
Richardson and Miles,
You got one more.
and oh man, who's got the Oh, one I did not mention on the list. I'm glad I'm remembering it as I'm rounding out a top five. It's Paul George's podcast, Podcast P with Paul
Interesting.
George.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a really fast growing podcast
yeah, I
that
can
started
imagine.
here, I think, recently in the last few months. So, but it's still catching a lot of steam here. Oh, another player that I didn't mention that has a podcast. He doesn't make that top five, but Trey Young apparently has a podcast called From the Point by Trey Young. Hmm.
Hmm.
And
Very,
I
very
don't know if it
interesting.
has debuted yet, actually. Hold on, let me check this. Okay, yeah, it did. It just debuted 2 weeks ago, as a matter of fact, from the recording of this episode. So it's a brand new little podcast here. So a
Starting
lot of NBA
June.
players
Check
out
her.
there with podcasts. If you have rankings of NBA player podcasts, you listen to podcasts out there about sports that's not just ours. You listen to the NBA players as well because you want their knowledge too. Then let us know who your top five podcasters who are NBA players, whether they're active or inactive or both, are. Ours was a combined list. You can do whatever you want. But those are my top five, BJ, and those are my rankings. And that is what's on Drew's mind.